Hello and welcome to my hair tutorial. I've been meaning to make this one for a very long time for the people on my Twitch and Discord, but this is the first time I've really gotten around to doing that. Originally it was scripted, but it felt a little rigid, so I'm going to be going and sort of making the script as I go along. I've got a few points written down on the side to sort of keep me on track and on topic, but aside from that, let's get right into the meat of things. So this, as a sort of a disclaimer before we go in, this is just my own process to drawing hair and rendering it. So it is by no means flawless, and in many cases, a lot of people have better processes than I sort of boast, as it were. But I just want to give people an idea of how I approach hair and in the ways in which I sort of see it and how I practice. So a big thing about hair is that there are two phases in my eyes. There's the outlining and creating the form of the hair as step one, and step two is going to be rendering the hair and bringing it to life on the canvas. So essentially, let's go into that first phase. So the first phase of drawing is going to be outlining the hair and creating the form. Now, this is going to be big in a lot of ways. Obviously, how you outline the hair is going to be super important, and knowing exactly how you want to approach it is going to be the first step. So here I just drew out a very basic head sketch, nothing too out there, and I'm going to show you how you should be approaching the hair, right? So I already have some basic outlines on a different layer, but for right now I'll sort of show you how I got to that ends, right? So you always want to take a point where the hair grows. I actually put this point up here. That's where the hair is going to be growing from, and you want all lines more or less leading back to the same place. So as we get into this, let's see. So we're going to take sort of our first line, and let's say we want it like sort of a bang that comes down the middle of around to there, around to there. So what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to kind of show you how I go about it. So here we go. We just want to make really big blocky wedges, and we're going to fine detail these wedges later on to sort of show more of the form as we go. So that's going to be a big blocky wedge of hair. Let's move on to the next strand, something like that. And on this side, maybe it comes around just like that. So what do we have here? We essentially have just a bunch of moving, or rather a bunch of pieces. We have a bunch of pieces that will end up becoming the hair. But for right now, they don't really look like much. They're all just lines that move back to a point. And you can sort of see how that's coming along and how you'd go about that. I actually did another version of this hair already, so I just wanted to show you how I went about it and essentially where we're going. So this is the hair I came up with. It only took me about a minute longer. I just wanted to make sure we got that out of the way. So same process essentially. So going on to that layer, as you can tell, all of these lines more or less lead up to the center. This one kind of moves up and around. These lines back up. And I ended up doing a sort of ponytail to sort of show you different styles of hair. So I also layered it into three sections. So we have the front of the hair, which is everything right around this area, right? We have the back of the hair that leads into the ponytail, which sort of follows the form of the head just slightly, not quite perfectly, but the hair is going to be more poofy on the head, and it's not obviously going to be perfectly on the head, like I said. And the final layer, the one furthest in the back, is going to be the ponytail itself, which is going to start from this top position. If you imagine the center of the ponytail being right around there, so as the hair gets tied back, as you can imagine, and it comes down all the way. So what have we created here? We've created a setup for how the hair is essentially going to be formed. From here, we just detail it out and sort of make sure that it all kind of falls in line with everything that we're seeing. So pretty simple up until this point. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna detail these hair wedges, still keeping the form more or less all pointing, or rather all lines more or less all pointing back to that specific point. So I'll probably speed up this part of the video, and yeah, we'll get right down to it. Okay, so as you can see, we've gone through and we sort of detailed the form just a little bit. We've taken those big blocky wedges of hair that we started off with, and we sort of like fine detailed them, got them into a sort of cohesive anime hair looking form. Let me actually turn down the opacity of the figure so that you can kind of see how the hair, or rather how I went about the hair, and I can sort of explain why I went about cutting some of the wedges as I did. So as you guys remember, this was a big blocky wedge right here. Let me go on this layer. So this was a big blocky wedge at the beginning. And what I did, I just kind of broke up the form, just added little cuts here and there. You can see it especially on this side as well. I also added these little fringes of hair going off the sides, kind of something that you see very common in a lot of anime pictures. A lot of artists really like to do that, and I made sure to balance it out on the other side as well with this strand of hair right there. Aside from that, you can sort of see how I made sure I imagined the hair and what it would look like in 3D space. So if you had sort of this side bang that comes around the sides like this, it stands to reason it's a three-dimensional object, right? Or rather, in anime at least, it's going to be. And because of that, you can kind of see how the form wraps around, and there's actually two sides of it. So there's the outside right here, this area that sort of faces, or more or less outward, and you have this sort of inside layer right there that kind of goes around and wraps around to become sort of a part of the outside. So essentially, that's how I went about sort of breaking up those little aspects of the piece. And if we're looking at the back layers, specifically the ponytail, you might notice I added some really big strands of hair coming down and sort of breaking up the form. So instead of having a hair that's like, or instead of having the ponytail, in a way that's kind of, maybe not so interesting, where it's just going down around like the way it originally was. Now we have hair that sort of goes down, but I mean, it goes down in the same way it did before. But we have these little strands sort of wrapping around the hair, sort of like that. You can see the top of it coming around like this. And you can kind of see the underside of the hair. So kind of the same aspect where I was saying that this side was facing outside, but this side faces the inside as it all wraps around to the same form. The same thing can be seen here. So I'm going from this point where the hair is tied down, and I'm sort of coming under, and you can sort of see this is the top side of the hair facing up, and this is the bottom facing down. So when I approach the hair, I'm thinking about it like this. It is a 3D form. How do I represent what I want to represent? So that's kind of the big ideas of what I was looking for. Other things you might notice when I was cutting down, so let's say this middle bang right here, right? I took that giant wedge of hair and I sort of split it up into several different pieces. One of them travels out and around, kind of the same concept as this one back up there. But they all still lead back to this point at the top. This one leads up and around. This one sort of goes around towards the top of the hair and sort of leads into this line that you see right there. And this sort of breaks up the monotony. So it's still going roughly the same direction, but not quite. So it breaks up into its own strand of hair. It's sort of just, you want to keep the hair interesting. If you try, I mean, you also don't want to go too far the other direction and make it too detailed, because as you start to zoom out from the canvas, suddenly it all just blends into this giant mess. So you want to keep it succinct, you want to keep it clean, and you want it to all flow. So essentially, that's how I went about the hair, as far as outlining it. So, but outlining, as we know, is just the first step. And in the next part of this tutorial, we'll go over how you pick colors and how you go about actually rendering the hair past the actual outline. So stick around, video's coming soon. I'll upload it as soon as I can.